Welcome back! Today we're going to talk about how to identify independent and dependent quantities from tables and graphs. Let's get started. Before we look at some examples, let's define what we mean by independent and dependent quantities. An independent quantity is the one that you control or choose. It's like the starting point, the thing that causes something else to happen. A dependent quantity, on the other hand, is the one that changes as a result of the independent quantity. It's the effect, or the result, of what happens when the independent quantity changes. Here's a quick way to remember. The independent quantity is the one you can change, and the dependent quantity changes because of it. Now, let's check out an example using a table about buying donuts. In this table, we're looking at two things: the number of donuts and the cost of donuts. The independent quantity here is the number of donuts. That's something you can decide on, whether you want 1 donut, 2 donuts, or 3 donuts. So the number of donuts, 1, 2, 3, 4, is the independent quantity. The dependent quantity is the cost of those donuts. The cost depends on how many donuts you decide to buy. For example, if you buy 1 donut, it costs $2. If you buy 2 donuts, it costs $4, and so on. So the cost of donuts, $2, $4, $6, $8, is the dependent quantity. So in this case, the number of donuts is the independent quantity, and the cost of the donuts is the dependent quantity. Let's look at another example, this time using a graph about smartphone apps. This graph shows the relationship between the number of smartphone apps downloaded and the cost of those apps. On this graph, the x-axis, that's the horizontal line, represents the independent quantity, which is the number of apps downloaded. In this case, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The y-axis, the vertical line, represents the dependent quantity, which is the cost of those apps. Since each app costs 75 cents, the costs for 1, 2, 3, and 4 apps are 75 cents, $1.50, $2.25, and $3. As you can see from the graph, as the number of apps you download increases, the total cost also increases. The cost depends on how many apps you decide to download. If you download more apps, you end up spending more money. So remember, the independent quantity is the one you can control or change, like the number of donuts you buy or the number of smartphone apps you download. The dependent quantity is the one that changes as a result of the independent quantity, like the cost of donuts or the cost of apps. And here's a helpful tip. When you're looking at a graph, the variable on the x-axis, horizontal, is usually the independent quantity, and the variable on the y-axis, vertical, is the dependent quantity. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay curious and stay fresh.